everyone. Today is Monday, February 24th, 2025. We're here this afternoon for a work session. Our discussion item is a work session with Community Planning Infrastructure and Resources. I'm Kristen Stevens, Chair of the Board of County Commissioners. With me is my fellow Commissioner John Kofalis, and Commissioner Joni Shattuck McNally is on the phone today. We also have our County Manager, Linda Volker, here. And I am going to pass things over to our Community Planning Infrastructure and Resources Director, Leslie Ellis, who will get us started. We have 3 items at our work session this afternoon, and I think we'll be starting with CDOT.
We are. Thank you very much. I'm Leslie Ellis here again, and I'll pass it along to my colleagues in engineering, and we appreciate our CDOT representatives who are here today: Chad Hall, Chris Bosfling, hopefully I'm pronouncing correctly, and then Eric Romero, who's here. James Usher is also part of this project team and isn't with us today. Mark Peterson, of course, is here from engineering, as well as some others in the audience. So I think I'll pass it over to Mark, and we'll begin this presentation on US 287. Thank you.
Yeah, good afternoon, Commissioners. Mark Peterson, County Engineer. US 287 for Larimer County has been a very important corridor for quite some time. I know you folks have had high level of interest in it. CDOT prepared, for example, a wildlife crossing pilot program grant application for our submission last year. That wasn't successful, but everybody was really excited to hear that CDOT had been successful in applying for I think it was MPDG grant. They combined mega, infra, and rural into one grant application, and CDOT landed a very large grant award for a project dealing with safety improvements along 287. So we've got Chad Hall, who's project manager, here to give a presentation and try to answer any questions you might have about the project moving forward. We had also understood you might have some questions or asking for an update on just kind of the status of the relocation of US 287 as well. So they're available to answer questions on that as well. So I'll turn it over to Chad and Chris. They can take it away.
All right, I don't think I messed anything up. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Thanks for giving us an opportunity to come and visit with you guys a little bit. As Mark said, we got a project coming up, and we're very excited about it. This is a big one. Oftentimes we don't get funding that we're hoping for, and this one, as Mark alluded to, we got a grant, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. But
I'm sorry, can you introduce yourself too?
Oh, I'm sorry, Chad Hall. Yep, I'm the project manager for this. Chris Bosfling is the resident engineer, so the level above me, and then Eric Romero is the assistant project manager on this. I apologize about that, Commissioner. Okay, so I think because you guys have some history on this, some of that's going to be redundant, so please just bear with me. I'll move fairly quickly through some of the old stuff. But yeah, Mark and had a chance to meet with Mark and Rusty and visit a little bit about this, and they suggested we come and talk with you guys and keep you up to speed on what's happening on this project. I expect during the duration of this project we'll work through Mark primarily to make sure we get information to you guys. I think it serves the project best if you're aware of what's going on, and when folks are asking you questions, you have them, answers to them. So we'll probably do that, and then periodically we're happy to come and present if we've got notable things to talk about. Okay, so by way of quick background, we did a safety study in 2023. This was something Chris Bosfling and Stephanie Gramberg worked on. Stolfus was a consultant that helped us pull together a handful of alternatives that would address the crash history that we were seeing up on the corridor. So a couple of important things on this slide. Number one is crash data from 2017 to 2021, which was the most up-to-date that we had. Yes, sir.
Chad, may I pause you for a moment? I was just informed that there's music playing and it's hard to hear the presentation. So Cassidy, I'm not sure if you're aware of that.
Let me check on that. I apologize.
No need to apologize. Just want to make sure.
Yeah, of course.
One of our staff people brought that to my attention.
Thank you. It should be better now. So I apologize.
If there was music playing, I hope it was the proper music.
Well, I had a background track set up, but it doesn't seem to be working right now.
Thank you all. Thank you, Cassidy. Thanks, Chair.
Okay. So a couple things that are notable, that 2017 to 2021. One of the first things we're going to do here is go back and validate. We have updated crash data now. We want to make sure that the recommendations that Stolfus came up with are still applicable for the newer crash data. So we will pull that, and that's going to be one of the first things that our consultant helps us with. Make sure the alternatives that they came up with are appropriate. About 15 projects. This provided the bulk of the scope of work for our grant application. The other thing I wanted to note on this is this conceptual cost estimate of $57 million for the 15 projects were identified. It's conceptual, so that's another effort that'll be important for us as our projects mature. We're able to get a little higher degree of accuracy on what our cost estimates are going to be. So we used this safety study and submitted, as Mark was talking about, the MPDG grant back in May last year, and did receive that award in October 2024. So the numbers that are listed here, that grant application had a project down south in Boulder County as well. The numbers that are listed here for money are just the upper component, which is what we're working on talking about here today. Okay, so elephant in the room about this, we are uncertain about the grant funding right now. All of the federal grants are paused right now. We are optimistic about this. This is a safety project, and I think pretty much everybody can get on board with that. I think it's just a matter of time for them administratively to review all the applications that are there. They're reviewing grant agreements that have already been signed, and so they're going pretty deep into what they're doing. That's the not so great news. The good news, RTD Paddock did give us the go-ahead to proceed with preliminary design on all of the components that are associated with this project. So we have funding to be able to move forward, and we have a fair bit of local match. I think this was a 60%. Oftentimes you'll see these grants are 80-20, local agency match is 20%. This one was 60-40, so we did together, I know Upper Front Range and some others came up with some funding that would match this. So we're in decent shape funding-wise, even if that grant falls through, which is great. So we will move forward. Obviously, in order to complete all the projects that we'd like to do, we're going to need the grant money to come through. Any questions on funding?
I mean, I guess one question is, so when we originally talked about some of the safety features that were needed, is this comprehensive of all those projects being done?
It is. Well, actually, that's a really good segue to the next one to talk
Okay,
about
there you
the
go.
scope,
Thanks.
if that's all right.
Sure, let's do it.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Commissioner.
before we segue, I appreciate the question. Could you just say a little bit more about the local match? Is the 22.1 primarily coming from the state, or what percentage is coming from the county?
So there's state money. I think there's also you can sometimes use federal funding as a part of the local match. Chris actually speak to this better than I could.
Yeah. I think that works. So on this particular grant, we have a 40% match. 20% is state money, has to be non-federal money, and then 20% is allowed to be other federal money. So we basically a 60-20-20. 20% is state only.
Thank you. Thank you.
Certainly. So even if we don't, or if we end up with that grant money, we are going to need to be mindful, because those were conceptual cost estimates. We're going to need to make sure that we're benefit cost-wise addressing the highest need. Our focus on this project is safety improvements, so particularly serious injuries and fatalities. It's a dangerous corridor up there, obviously. I think that's well known to everybody here. This project scope, like I said, is pretty in line with what the safety assessment report said. We have a few different intersections. I'll talk about Owl Canyon in a little more detail in a minute. Red Mountain is where the University of Wyoming swimmers crash happened up there, and then Bonner Springs. We have a handful of intersections up there that kind of experience the same type problem, but some of them displayed a more crash history, higher crash history than others, and so those were the ones that were prioritized. Southbound passing lanes, we have two different segments, and they're each about 2 miles long, so 4 miles of passing lane up there to supplement what already is on the road. That'll be nice. Sometimes people get impatient and then they want to pass, and if they pass and there's traffic coming toward you, it can be a dangerous situation. So hopefully that'll help with that. And then shoulder widening, we would like to have a 6-foot minimum shoulder in the corridor. This was entirely coincidental, but the picture that's up there is a pretty good indicator of something that we're going to have to be mindful of on the corridor, because we will be funding limited even if the federal grant money comes through. All of our projects are funding limited. I don't think this is probably news to anybody in the room, but that's a spot there. And I don't actually know if that's a box culvert or a bridge, but you can see where the shoulder drops off on the left side. In order to widen that, it's a very short segment, so a little bit of shoulder there wouldn't be that big of a deal, but in order to do it there, we'd need to replace the bridge or widen the box, extend the box culvert. So from a benefit cost standpoint, that is probably not a project that's going to rise to the top. Nice to have the shoulders. Consistent shoulders are very important, but in a situation like this, that's a pretty hefty load for the improvement that we'd be seeing. And then we've got side slope flattening. So one of the things we see up there also is a slope kind of off the side of the road. The slope drops off pretty substantially in some areas, and it's not a recoverable slope, and so folks will exit the road because they're not paying attention and someone's slowing down to turn left, and then they're unable to get back onto the road because they jerked the steering wheel to the side, and it's steep enough that they end up rolling, and that's where we get some of the more serious crashes up there, some of the higher injury crashes up there. So that's another thing that we would like to address. Exact locations are to be determined. We need to collect survey data first, so we'll do that, one of our early efforts. Try to figure out geometry in the area and see what we need to do to fix that. And then wildlife management, Mark alluded to that other grant that you guys had submitted that unfortunately we're unsuccessful on. We do have, as part of the infra grant, there's wildlife fencing and improvements to wildlife crossings. Originally we anticipated this would be an overpass, is what we were hoping for. With our focus being on safety improvements, the wildlife stuff is, the wildlife crashes, it's the number one cause of crashes in the corridor, but it's generally property damage only. And so we're not seeing the safety improvements from those fixes. That said, we do have, I think, about 6.5 miles of wildlife fencing right now anticipated. And then we'll make improvements to the crossings. You know, those fences just funnel wildlife into a certain area, and then you want to have some way to allow the wildlife to cross the road. So more to come on that. We'll work with CPW and our environmental folks and come up with the best solution for those. And then finally, this is something that wasn't in the grant application, but is kind of a nice addition. We do have a resurfacing segment up here, and I can't recall offhand. I think it's maybe 6 miles. But this is not a part of the grant. We have resurfacing projects come up when the road conditions get poor. It's just a sort of a 4-year plan. Where the road's the worst is where the money goes, generally speaking. And it happened to come up on this. What's great about that is that we get the economy of scale when we have a contractor out there and we're able to combine that. And then maybe as importantly, the traveling public is only impacted once for these two efforts, which is a nice thing to do. So looking forward to that. Looking forward to the whole project. Hopefully we get that funding in. So yeah, I wanted to cover some specifics on Owl Canyon, but do you have any questions maybe first on the scope at large?
Any questions, Commissioner? I don't have any. Commissioner Shattuck McNally, any questions?
No, at this time, that was a very good presentation. Thank you.
Okay. Just a couple more things to go to. I want to make sure you guys see funding and schedule stuff as well. But Owl Canyon is a project that we're going to kick out here this summer. Different residency under James is taking care of that one. I just pulled this picture off of Street View, and you can see the contrast between the striping and the pavement is very poor. So the intent, I think it was a chip seal, maybe, that bleach. Weird, I hadn't seen it before. Yeah.
Unfortunate colors.
Yeah, unfortunate colors. Yeah. So what she's going to do up there on that project is just do a 2-inch mill and a 2-inch overlay. So it ends up being the roadway surface is at the same elevation as it is now. All of that work will be in the existing footprint, which is important for us to be able to get through the clearances that we need, right-of-way. We don't want to acquire any right-of-way. We don't want to mess with the environmental stuff too much in order to be able to move pretty quickly. So they are flying on that project. Internal design, which is helpful also for moving quickly. They just had their 90% meeting last week, so they're hoping to advertise here in the next couple of months and then get out building come this summer. I think that's going to be a really nice project. The overlay will provide some contrast with the dark asphalt and new striping in there. They're going to try to build it such that there's no scarring. Sometimes when we do a project, then there's scarring from when we remove the stripes and during construction, you'll see temporary striping in there. So I don't know, some other things, that and then signage should be very helpful for the safety at that intersection. Okay. Yeah, so moving on to schedule here, one thing I think we're probably going to do, and all of this information is based on getting that grant. Things will be a little bit different, similar, but a little bit different if we don't. But we will split this into 2 construction packages. Reason being, we appreciate the urgency of needing to address some safety concerns up there. And it's very difficult for us to move quickly when we have to acquire right-of-way, which some of these projects will certainly require. Our standard right-of-way process is 18 months, just in general. So that's a thing that is going to take a little longer to work through. But first package that we're hoping for will be those projects that don't require acquisition and also don't have much in the way of utilities. Those major utility relocations can similarly take a very long time. So 2026 construction, that's calendar year 2026 construction for package 1, 2027 for package 2. And again, we're hoping to get through preliminary design on all of these projects by this fall. We've got a great team on board. They're going very fast right now, which is great. I'm trying to keep up with them, which is the way that you want to have it as a project manager. So that's the main stuff that I wanted to cover. Of course, any additional questions, happy to answer those.
Any questions? Commissioner, please go ahead.
First of all, a comment, this is great news, thank you. This is something that folks who live up in that neck of the woods have been concerned about for a long time. We've had some well-attended town hall or community conversation, so this is wonderful news, thank you. And I seem to recall the last time we talked about this, we were trying to get funding that might focus on the overpass issue and the wildlife crossings, but it sounds like if all goes well, we may be able to address a lot of the priorities that were identified in the safety report. So that's wonderful. Another comment is I just received a text message from one of our rancher friends up in that area, and his comment, and I wonder, Chet, how you would respond is that, give me a moment, please. Those narrow bridges without shoulders are very dangerous on 287. I mean, the picture you showed us the going into that bridge, there was the dirt part of it that had no shoulder, but it sounds like he's talking about the actual bridge itself has no shoulder, but that's where you have to put in a whole new bridge.
Yeah.
I mean, can you comment on that, please, Chad?
Yeah.
Is it a cost prohibitive, or how do we?
Well, it kind of depends, Commissioner, on what our cost estimate it's come in at. So shoulder widening is one thing. If we have a southbound passing lane that's going through a similar situation, then it could just be a component that we incorporate into the project. So at that point, yeah, we're widening, extending the box culvert, or potentially replacing the bridge. I think mostly it's box culverts along this corridor, but yeah, so it could get wrapped in. It'll certainly be a consideration, and I appreciate the concern. Those are dangerous.
Okay, just to provide that input that I think at least one person, I think others
Yeah.
feel that's definitely a dangerous situation.
Yeah, I
Chris?
appreciate that.
Yeah, so I think that everything becomes a cost-benefit ratio, right? We're going to have a set amount of money, and whatever gives us the most bang for the buck is what we're going to design and build. If we have enough money, something like this, sure, would definitely look at it. Definitely not saying it's not worth it. I think everybody agrees that there's safety considerations up there, and I can totally understand the concern about this, this area as an example of others. But again, it's going to be one of those, if we can spend the same amount of money, but yet save that many more injuries or any fatalities in a different area, I think that's where we would put the money.
Great, thank you. One more question, please.
Sure.
Very quickly, regarding Owl Canyon and the resurfacing, the signing, striping, that's also very encouraging. The picture shows the approach to the intersection. Will this also address right there at the intersection as you go through the rock? I mean, that whole section of the highway is pretty bizarre.
Yeah.
Will this clean that up so we can actually see where the striping is? And
Yeah.
Oh, good.
We'll go about half mile before and half mile after, so it'll be about a mile-long project. Yeah, Yeah.
Great.
So that should address, and I appreciate that there was conversation about that at the 90% meeting last week of how are we gonna, there's traffic coming off of Owl Canyon onto 287, and they're merging to try to get ahead of slower trucks that are doing that, and there's some things that are difficult to fix. With engineering solutions, but we can do what we can to put signage in there, and then of course that striping I think is going to be very helpful.
Okay, thank you. And I did say that was my last question. If time allows, I have one more follow-up, but let's move on, please.
Okay.
Or Jody or you.
Commissioner Shattuck McNally, any questions?
No, thank you.
Thanks. I guess, and I guess you probably don't know what the timeline is for finding out if those grant funds get released.
Unfortunately, no. We hoped, I'd heard something about early March, but I think it's going to be really dependent on the type of projects, and yeah.
How late can you hear before, it starts to delay some of the work that you're doing? You're still going to go through with the design work, but,
Yeah.
it could delay some of the projects that were
Yeah.
intended to start in 2026, or,
Well, and I sure hope it's not that long. I hope we hear one way or the other prior to
Right.
that.
okay.
We'll move forward per Heather's suggestion or recommendation. We'll move forward. This is getting into the weeds a little bit, but the difficulty is if we expend some of that local match now, we can no longer count it as match for the grant. So it's nice in design. We don't burn through money that fast in design. Design isn't expensive compared to when they're putting asphalt out there.
Right.
But we're mindful of every dollar that we spend, that's taking away from the money that we can have for local match. Now, that said, this is a high priority area, and that's been acknowledged, and funding has followed that acknowledgement. So I think being able to backfill, and this is out of my lane, I think it's out of all of our lanes, but I'm promising you to, no. But I think, there's enough importance up here that finding funding to backfill and still get the federal dollars, that is something that'll happen.
Okay.
But that's a risk, Commissioner, and it's just
Sure.
something that we're absorbing. I don't know a way around it.
Yeah, I understand.
We're going to keep moving forward with the design. We've got money for construction. We don't have, obviously, we'd have less money if for some reason we didn't get the grant at all. But we still have enough to start building something. But the way we're looking at it right now, we're moving forward, and it's something out of our control in terms of that grant funding, kind of turning that faucet back on. But so we're just gonna keep moving forward. It's unfortunate if we, the more money we expend, the less of a match. But again, like Chad said, it's a high priority corridor, and we've gotten this far. I think there's momentum behind us, so we're going to keep moving forward.
Well, I appreciate your work on this corridor. Maybe one, and because the other topic is
Yeah.
going to probably
And-
take
and
quite a
we
bit of
could
time.
We could talk offline, but I'm just curious, do we have a plan in place for how do we inform the community that we're making progress on this project? Because I think this is good news, and it seems like when we do have good news, even though there are some question marks, we ought to share that good news. So I don't know if our folks are thinking about how we might communicate this to folks up in Livermore, Virginia Dale, and places like that.
So as far as our scope goes, we do anticipate having a website. Most of our projects do have websites, but a list of stakeholders would be very helpful so that we can keep everybody up to speed. I understand that Livermore meeting was fantastic and really well attended.
It was good.
But I don't know that we had, my understanding is we don't have a list of emails or anything from that.
And actually, I think we do, and we can discuss with Leslie and others. At a minimum, we want to make sure that folks are aware of the website and an email that says we had this work session and there's progress. And if folks are interested, I or some of us can go up there, or maybe ask you folks to join us to give an update.
Yeah, I think it would be totally appropriate to go back up like we did about a year ago, almost a year ago now. Kind of give an update of where we are. It'd be great maybe once they start construction on Owl Canyon, and maybe build a little credibility that way.
Absolutely. Although I've learned, and it's all been a good process, that best to be invited to go back up there. So we'll wait to see if get that invitation.
It's encouraging to know that there's an email list. That would be very helpful for us and for our consultant as well.
I know there was some curiosity too about the 287 relocation, and I don't
please.
know if we have time. Do you feel like we would have time to discuss? Okay. maybe just, where we're at with that. And I think when we had seen the initial project, we had some concerns, were we sort of building back better? Were we making, building in good safety, into that reworked section of the road? And so I think we had questions about that and timelines and things, so I don't know if you have any updates on that.
So it is moving forward. I'm sure you've heard that for many years now. It's not a CDOT project, so we don't really have control over it, although we're very involved in terms of, obviously it's a highway, we care about it. We're involved, we've been involved through the design. The big question is when are they gonna start, right? Right now, they're going through some legal challenges. Their start date is penciled in right now, January of '27. If they can beat that at all, they definitely will, especially if maybe some smaller early out projects. But as it sits right now, they're looking at January of '27. The project's designed, the project's on the shelf. There's 100% design there. I think if we haven't finalized the IGA between CDOT and Northern Water, it's imminent. It's really close in terms of our involvement in the project. They're running it. It's their contract. However, we're going to be out there from a primarily a quality standpoint, and just an overall construction management, where there's going to be basically two teams, one from Northern Water, which I'm guessing might be more concerned about the money side. We're going to be concerned more with the quality and adherence to the contract.
And are you satisfied with the safety that's been built into that section of
Yeah.
the road? I mean, we feel like the sizing of the shoulders and passing lanes and everything is better than before, or similar?
Most definitely.
Okay.
Yeah, so overall, it's shorter, right? Which gives you less of an opportunity, or less chances of having troubles. So a shorter road, great. Updated geometry, widened shoulders, softer side slopes. So if somebody does go off, they're recoverable. But ideally, you don't even make it off because you have a wider shoulder than what's out there today. Fewer accesses, so you have less traffic coming on or off the highway. Presents fewer conflict points. So yeah, we feel that it's definitely a safer alignment, safer road than what exists today.
Thank you for explaining that. I
Yep.
appreciate that. Did you have any questions, Commissioner? Please go ahead.
Thank you, Chris. Isn't it correct that on the southern end, where it turns off near Ted's place to go on the east side of the Hogbacks, there's supposed to be a roundabout there? Or has that been changed? I thought, did I get that wrong, Mark?
I think you might be talking about, CDOT did work to realign the southern end of the highway to where there would be a roundabout at what's Overland Trail, 21C.
21, yeah.
I
That's
believe
what I'm talking about.
That's maybe what you're talking about.
So that's part of the plan.
That's part of the project, is
Okay, the
that
project.
intersection, and that roundabout was added into the project,
Right, it
and they
was
extended it down,
Overland Trail.
basically in response to comments and concerns that the county had expressed. So
That's right.
they worked with us on that one.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
I'm good.
Commissioner Shattuck McNally, any questions?
No, I think my question was asked. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much. Thanks for, we appreciate the work that you're doing. It's going to make that road that's been, there have been a lot of tragedies on that road. I mean, many of us know folks that have had serious injuries or deaths on that road, and so it's a big concern for our community. I mean, I'm sure it's a concern for Wyoming. They have to be happy. They make that trip a lot too from Laramie, and so I think honestly, it's a benefit for both states to have a better road and a more safety improvement. So we're excited about that. Thank you for sharing. Appreciate it. All right, we will move on to our next agenda item, which is also a big one, which is the draft wildfire hazard map and resiliency code.
It's pretty exciting.
Great.
All right, well, Eric is getting set up here. Eric Freed, our building official, is here to present the wildfire resilience item and wildfire code map topic. And I'll let you introduce your colleague here as well.
Yeah, I think you know Derek Road. Eric Freed, county building official. And Derek Rosenquist is here from Sheriff's Office. And we also have Josh Roberts from Office of Emergency Management listening in on this. So I just wanted to present information on the state wildfire resiliency code, which is being developed right now and is coming down the pike when we'll have to adopt that code or something like it. I didn't know how much you were following it. I expect Commissioner Shattuck McNally's been following it closely because of her work on the Fire Commission. I also wanted to show you the draft map. This is still a work in process. It's not the final map or the code, but it is pretty significant. Wanted to show you what we've been doing, myself and Amy White, mostly our code compliance supervisor, to let other fire departments and building departments know about this because we're all going to have to work together. And then maybe get some initial direction from you, at least as to what your thoughts are. We have some options in terms of adopting the code or something stronger, the state map or something stronger. So let's go to, I guess, slideshow. So background, you may know this because of the very high wildfire danger we have in the state and in the county. There's a state wildfire commission. There was a bill that was passed in 2023, SB 23166, making major changes to how we deal with wildfire. It created the Colorado Wildfire Resiliency Code Board, directed that board to draft the state's wildland urban interface. That's where the wildlands meet the development, basically, where you have the most fire danger, and also directed the board to adopt a model wildfire resiliency code for both construction management and site management. Some of the key parts of that bill were to define what a governing body is, because governing bodies in the wildfire urban interface, the WUI, are required to adopt the wildfire code, and that's the city or town council, board of trustees, or similar body. It's the board of directors of a fire protection district organized under certain parts of state law. And I'm not clear if that's every fire district in the county. We think it's more likely the ones that have the ability to tax and adopt codes. And then finally, it says that the governing body includes the Board of County Commissioners with respect to the area outside the corporate limits of a city or town and outside the boundaries of a fire district. So it's not clear the way the law was written who has jurisdiction inside a fire district outside a city or town. Is that the fire district? Is that us? Is that both of us? That's something we're trying to figure out right now. We've asked the county attorney for clarification on that, and they're checking with the other county attorneys around the state to see how that might work. It allows a governing body to ask the Division of Fire Prevention and Control, that's where that Wildfire Resiliency Board sits, to enforce the code and perform inspections if they're unable to do so. That shouldn't be a problem for us, but for some of the smaller areas that may not even have a building department and don't have the capacity to enforce codes, they can ask the state to do it for them. It gives the Wildfire Resiliency Code Board discretion to review the codes we adopt and make sure it complies with the law. There's a method in there for asking for code modifications, and then there's a written report that the board has to make saying which jurisdictions have adopted the state code, which ones have not adopted the state code, who's in compliance, who's not in compliance. And the timeline is pretty quick. They've been working on this all last year, but they have to, as I said, there's a draft code out right now and a draft map. The final state code has to be published by July 1st, and then governing bodies like ours must adopt the state code or something stronger within 3 months, so that's by October 1st of this year. And then those codes have to take effect no later than January 1st, 2026. That's going to fit pretty well, we think, with the overall code review schedule we've set up, where we're going to start in March, hopefully get done by June, look at this code, adopt it, have it all go into effect next year. So we'll have time to come back and talk to you later once the once the state code is adopted, then we know exactly what's in it. So this is just a screenshot of the state wildfire hazard map for Larimer County, and in the packet I gave you, you can click on the map. It takes you to the Wildfire Resiliency Code Board. The bottom line is that the wildfire area is a lot wider than was originally thought, but I think we all learned from the Marshall Fire that they didn't think they were in the wildfire hazard area. They were a subdivision surrounded by grass, but high enough winds and a spark, and it did tremendous damage. And so we realized that a lot more of the state is in the mapped wildfire hazard area. The state map is based on the best available data they have from Colorado State Forest Service and other data points. And as you can see, it's almost all of Larimer County, for one, is in the medium or high fire danger. Red is the high and orange is medium. And in developing their code, they decided to lump those two together. The medium and the high fire danger would have to do more things to protect the houses and the site. The yellow is the low fire danger, and there's less requirements there. And then the stuff with no color at all is not in the wildfire hazard area. So you can see, first of all, that our current adopted wildfire hazard area pretty much starts west of maybe County Road 19 or 21 and goes up into the foothills. But this is coming all the way over to the eastern border of the county, mostly because the grasslands are now realized to have a higher fire danger. But there's little bits of yellow or even no color sprinkled throughout the medium and high fire danger. So that's one of the things we're going to have to wrestle with. Do we treat all of them individually based on the state map, and some of these lines actually go across parcels? So we look at someone's parcel and go, well, you're partly low and partly medium, and you have to do this. Or another idea is maybe we just declare that all of unincorporated Larimer County as a medium to high fire danger. And there's several reasons for that. So that's something we'll want to come back to and get your thoughts on. This has been a big surprise, I think, to a lot of cities and counties that didn't think they were in the wildfire hazard area. I mean, we knew we were because we've had some of the worst wildfires in the state. But if you zoom in on this, and I won't try to do it because it takes a long time for the map to load. But every one of the 8 cities and towns in Larimer County, at least part of their territory, is in the mapped wildfire hazard area, which means they will have to adopt a code if this is the final map that stands. So we've been talking to Fort Collins and Loveland and everyone else saying, well, we'll work with you, but you guys are going to have to adopt a code as well. It won't be as hard for us because we already have wildfire codes, but these go a little bit beyond what our current codes are. So the code would apply to all new construction and moved buildings, additions greater than or equal to 500 square feet, and if you touch the exterior walls or roof, siding or roof, more than 25%, the new work will have to comply. Like most codes, if you re-roof your house, it doesn't mean you have to go back and reside your whole house too or do things like that, but the new work will have to comply. Low fire danger areas require Class 1 hardening and site management, and the medium and high areas require Class 2. So what do those things mean? Class 1 structure hardening, so that would be anywhere that's low, medium, or high. Class A roof coverings, we already require that in our code anyway, so that's not a change. Non-combustible gutters and downspouts, so you have to have metal gutters and downspouts at this point. Ignition-resistant ventilation openings, so there are certain vents that are smart vents that'll close, or that they have a certain, I think 1/8 mesh, non-combustible, so it'll change that. But that's not a lot for Class A. For Class 1. For Class 2, that's probably the big change. Exterior walls, soffits and eaves would now have to be ignition resistant, non-combustible, 1 hour fire rated, heavy timber log wall. So you can no longer have wood siding on your homes, basically. Right now, well, I'll go in later what our current code is. It would also require metal flashing. Basically, you want to not have fire. You don't want to give fire the ability to get underneath a house or deck, so you want to bring it down to grade and enclose it. Underfloor areas enclosed. Deck walking surfaces, not the deck structure itself, but the deck walking surfaces would have to be non-combustible. Exterior glazing, you'd have to basically have dual pane windows, but that's already required by energy code to pass energy code. Exterior doors, that would be a change. You'd have to have non-combustible doors or 20-minute or better fire rated, basically like the door you have between your house and garage. So now exterior doors would have to be beefed up. And there was a whole section there about gaps in vehicle access door perimeter gaps. There must have been some fire somewhere where the embers were able to get in around your garage door, basically. So they're tightening up that as well. Does that make sense so far? Or? Okay. So then, what people always ask, what about detached, sheds, non-habitable utility accessory structures? They don't have to follow the rules if they're either not over 120 square feet in floor area and 30 feet away from a habitable building, or they're at least 50 feet from a habitable building, no matter how large. So if they're far enough away that they wouldn't impact the principal structure, they're okay. But if they're within that area, they have to meet the same rules as well. And so there's not a blanket exception for ag buildings, but if they're far enough away, then they would be accepted from this. Okay, site management, and I think Derek knows a lot more about this than I do. For Class 1 site management, you have to have non-combustible hard surface materials like rock, gravel, sand, cement. You couldn't have any planting except ignition-resistant vegetation. We don't want those highly combustible shrubs or bushes near the house. Thin tree crowns within 10 feet and prune tree branches 6 to 10 feet above the ground. And then it's also going to require roads and driveways be signed, building addresses be signed. We already require building addresses for new buildings anyway. And retaining walls would have to be non-combustible within 8 feet of the building, as well as fencing. So that's the difference. You couldn't have a wood fence go right up to the building, because what they learned at the Marshall fire is that's a fire bridge. The fire might come right up to your house. So you could have a fence, but at least the last 8 feet would have to be non-combustible. And then for Class 2 site management, there's only a few other things. It's kind of the reverse from the building part, where Site 1 wasn't a lot and Site 2 is a lot. It just increases what you have to do in terms of keeping shrubs away and spacing them. And these are the home ignition zones that are standard fire mitigation practice. So our current rules, just as a comparison, is we do exempt detached utility buildings up to 600 square feet, no matter how close they are. So we wouldn't be able to do that anymore. We at this point exempt loafing sheds of any size because they're an unenclosed building and they were considered to have a low fire hazard. But again, we'd have to do at least what the state requires. Class A roofs. Right now, exterior walls can be either 1 hour fire rated or log construction, or have at least Class C or better flame spread siding. And since Class C is the easiest way to go, that's what everybody does. People always find the simplest answer to the problem. And the lower 4 feet have to be entirely non-combustible, or the first 5 feet of ground cover non-combustible. Well, now all the siding will have to be non-combustible, and 5 feet of ground cover will have to be non-combustible. We require you to provide and maintain defensible space, just as the state code does, although the mechanism for maintaining defensible space is unclear. We don't have annual inspections. We don't go back and make sure you didn't plant anything. And a few other things like solid fuel chimney spark arresters, and make sure propane tanks are in the defensible space. But it's not that different from what we've got, so it wouldn't be as big a stretch for us to go to these rules. But because these are pretty far-reaching, it's going to make a huge difference, especially to smaller fire districts who maybe haven't had to enforce this before, as well as to building departments who haven't had any wildfire hazard rule. Once we became aware of it, we made sure our staff knew about it. We met with Sheriff's Emergency Services staff and GIS to see what it would take if they want to do their own map. We brought it to the attention of Northern Colorado building and fire officials, and in fact, we have a meeting this Friday with all the fire departments and building departments down at the Loveland Peridot building. And obviously touched a nerve, because I think we had like 35 people say they were going to come to the meeting or attend one way or the other. And then also we wanted to bring it to your attention. So one of the big issues, and I know elephant in the room was already taken earlier today, so I didn't know that was going to happen. A governing body is the Board of Commissioners for the area outside of a fire district. So who enforces it inside the fire district? Some of the bigger fire departments might be able to, but the smaller fire departments don't have the capacity to look at structure hardening and all. So we're not sure if we can administer the rules. That's what our attorneys are looking into. In a stakeholder meeting, the Jefferson County folks said that their attorneys had looked into it and said they could not enforce it within the fire districts. But that may have just been what their attorneys said. So we'll sit down with the fire districts and see what they want to do. If we are allowed to enforce it inside the fire districts, we'd like to enforce the construction piece of it. Maybe we need an IGA, I don't know. We just have, that's what we do. And either the fire districts or the sheriff's office would hopefully administer the site management. So those are kind of the biggest questions right now, as well as what effect this will have on housing affordability. Of course, it will increase the cost somewhat. And also, how do we inform the public? because it is a change. And especially if we basically have two choices in terms of how we handle all of unincorporated Larimer County. If we use the state map, as you saw, there was a little patchwork of mostly red and orange, but little dots here and there. Do we do that, and now we have one more variable when someone wants to build their house? There's snow load, wind load, wildfire, sprinkler, energy, flood. Or it would be simpler to maybe declare all of unincorporated Larimer County has a medium to high fire danger, and everyone has to follow those rules. The downside of that is people who would have otherwise been in a low area are going to do a little more than they would have had to do otherwise. But the upside is it's a lot simpler for customers and staff, and also my argument is there's a certain amount of herd immunity. If you build your house and it's not wildfire proof and I'm your neighbor, my house is a little less safe because your house isn't, whereas if everyone follows the same rules, it makes us all a little bit safer. So those are some things. That's a big question for you guys to think about. I don't need an answer right now. I just want to put it on your radar screen. And also, do we just adopt the state code, or do we keep the few things that we have in our code that aren't in the state code, like the spark arresters? And then one other thing is people will be able to petition us as the authority having jurisdiction for code modifications if they have an alternate way of doing things. And we'd have to come up with what standards we would have for approving code modifications. So that's something to think about. So I didn't know if you had anything you wanted to add up front, or...
Just a couple things. I took a look at the site maintenance side of things. It matches really well with State Forest Service Home Ignition Zone Guide, which is what's currently referenced in our building code. A couple things here and there go a little bit beyond, which is from a firefighter perspective and somebody who lives in the mountains and herd immunity, I am fine with that. One tricky part is no dead vegetation in the bushes around a house, so that makes it very difficult to do an inspection, especially with new construction or short-term rentals in the wintertime, because I can't tell what's dead and what's live in the bushes in that zone too. But at the state level, this is still in draft and they're still looking for input, so. But the rest of it is very, very similar to the current home ignition zone. So site maintenance doesn't change a lot. But yeah, there are definitely some tweaks to do, but I do kind of like the herd immunity, having seen that in the Marshall Fire, especially in subdivisions where the homes are built right next to each other and going house to house, trying to cut off decks and things like that. So, personal experience.
Great. Well, a lot to think about here.
Madam Chair, can I ask some questions?
Sure. Being mindful that we got about 10 minutes.
Yeah, well, I have a lot. As you all know, I've been watching this very closely and been attending some of those meetings, and these are some of the concerns I've had all along. And so a couple of things, I have a whole long list, but I can talk to you guys offline maybe. But first, I have been concerned, and I brought this up, but we still kind of didn't take a position on this. We took a different position, but I do think after my phone calls with some other commissioners today and people on the WUI Cord bill board, that Senate Bill 25-142, there are some amendments to that, so maybe we could slow down the implementation for this summer and get 6 more months to at least try to do this well with the implementation. So that's one thing for my colleagues to consider. Do we support that bill now with some amendments that are a little more geared to helping all folks kind of ease into this, because this is a lot to adopt. Secondly, I don't know if you addressed this, Eric, and I know you and I have been watching this closely, that there a board of the appeals, if people want to appeal this, that comes to the Board of County Commissioners or is it Board of County Commissioners or the fire district? And then how does the fire district or any of those other groups handle appeal? And so I'm curious about that as well, because I think that's a really big missing piece on this board currently, and that's why this bill that's being introduced, 142, adds more commissioners and more municipality representatives, because it was only 1 and 1 on there. And we know we do have Loveland Fire Authority, Fire Marshal on there, and she's been very helpful. But I just, those are my top ones right now. But I have a long list of things, and I won't monopolize the time. Thanks.
Yeah, and we can come back and talk about this more later, because it's not the final code. And as Commissioner Sheddick McNally's alluded to, there's a state bill to slow down the whole process. So depending on what happens with that, this might all change. But this is
Yeah,
where it
that's
is
what I
right
was
now.
kind of looking up on my phone, was that when the commissioner and I was reminding myself of what Senate Bill 25-142 looked like, but it does at least delay it 6 months, it looks like, right? And has some other regulations around it. So, Commissioner Cavalos, you have questions?
Thank you. And just briefly, I think this merits further, deeper discussion. For me, what stood out in the presentation was the uncertainty regarding governance oversight if it's within a fire protection district. And I think the attorneys are looking at that. So my question related to that is two-part. One is, when might we hear from the attorneys some general agreement exactly what that means? And also, does Senate Bill 25-142, does it address that particular piece of the previous bill that seems to be a little bit vague?
We could, I don't know the details on 142. I'll have to look into it.
Okay.
But we given it to our attorneys about a week ago, so I'm hoping maybe this Wednesday we can get some info from them before we go talk to all the fire districts and the other building departments.
Yeah, if I may, just to close, at least on my part, it'll be critical to obviously get the county attorney's opinion, and also to hear back from the various fire protection districts, with your meeting before you all come back to us. And I'd also like to know better the housing affordability piece. I don't know if there's a way to quantify that, or would it increase costs, new construction by 5%?
Right.
You said somewhat, but somewhat is it's one of those subjective terms. So it'd be good to know more about that. That's all. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Madam Chair,
Yeah, go ahead, Commissioner.
there are amendments being crafted as we speak to deal with all that you guys talked about. Remember, I brought this up last week about this bill. And if Eric and Derek and others have suggestions for amendments addressing these concerns, which I share your concerns and have all along, I would really hope that you could maybe forward those so I can get those to the bill writer, the folks who are having one-on-ones with the bill drafters or the sponsor right now, so we can see what we can do to try to influence, to slow this down and maybe get a few more changes in there to clarify. Thanks.
Yeah, I think there's some value in slowing it down to kind of really answer some of these questions, that if we have these questions, everybody else must. So I guess, I would say, with regard to making the whole of Larimer County sort of medium and high danger, I mean, that would increase, in the low areas would increase costs.
Mm-hmm.
And so some of that, I think, would be important to know. It would provide protections, though, and, I mean, it's hard, it's tricky to figure that out, right? The balance of that, of making sure a community is safe, and also making sure that people can afford to, to build, honestly. So it sounds like, well, I appreciate, where we're at right now. I think it seems like there's a lot of moving pieces still. And, but yeah, I mean, I agree with Commissioner Sheddick McNally. If you all as professional, and subject matter experts have suggestions about how to make this better, I mean, it sounds like please get them to, Commissioner Sheddick McNally, and she'll obviously share with us. But I mean, we would be open to advocating for changes that make sense to you. I just think that it's important to get this right. It's important to keep people safe, and it's important to, keep, I think, some things in mind, like affordability and what does that look like in our community.
One more thing real quick.
Go ahead, Commissioner.
Yeah, and I think what would be helpful when the next time we have a conversation about this is if we could get some kind of a side-by-side, what our current practices are in Larimer County and how that compares with what's being proposed. That kind of visual, that kind of chart might be helpful.
Well, right, I mean, since we already have some of these things in place, I mean, it's not, I mean, it won't add as much to the cost if we had nothing in place, so I'm glad for the regulations that we do have in place. And I certainly understand why these other regulations are being proposed. Yeah, I guess to be continued.
Madam Chair,
Yeah, go ahead, Commissioner.
just want to set realistic expectations. I don't the map is going to be able to be changed. And because we are a high-risk county, and I don't think they're going to open up changes to the whole previous legislation for the WUI Code Board. So I just want to set expectations about that for us going forward, that we may not be able to influence all the things that my colleagues have brought up today, but certainly I think the 6 month and clarifying some of the things on jurisdiction and governance is really important going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Yeah, we need to set our expectations. I wasn't necessarily thinking the map could be changed, just that, but we obviously could adopt even stronger regulations. And that's what, in effect, making our whole entire community medium to high fire danger, we would be accepting those higher standards. And that would be changing our map, right? So, yeah, I think we need to think about that. But I think having some more time to think about things, and really understanding this jurisdictional portion better would be valuable. So, I guess we will.
Hey, Madam Chair.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I apologize. I have a little delay. Counties and cities were able to jump on a Zoom call with the WUI Code Board back in January, but I think it was a day where we couldn't join in. I also think it had too many people on the Zoom call or something. They promised they were going to do another Zoom call or listening session with counties and cities. Eric, I haven't seen anything on that. Do you know if that happened? Did we just missed it?
It did already happen. It was a follow-up stakeholder meeting they did.
Okay, because I think I missed that one. Thank you.
All right, well, we're probably not going to solve it in the next 3 minutes of what we want to do. But I think, I'm sure we'll need to have further discussions on this and figure this out. But thank you for bringing this forward. And I'm really glad to have a better understanding of where we're at this point, and we will figure it out together. And then we will move on to our third discussion item, which is the CPIR update.
Okay, thank you. I'll be quick, because I know we're running short on time. First item is just a quick update on the afternoon hearing today. You do have 3 consent items. We're not hearing that there's any indication that those would be pulled at this point. 3 discussion items, which similarly, there's some complexity with a couple of them, but we're not hearing a lot from public interest that you're going to have a lot of people attending or anything like that. So, that from Jenny, that it should be a regular, fairly routine afternoon hearing this afternoon. Do you have any questions at all about that?
I think I had a question at least on the tabled item. Looked like it came before. We can move the order around to do consent first, which makes the most sense, and let those folks go first. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think that's. Do you have any questions, Commissioner? Commissioner Shattuck McNally, any questions? All right.
Okay.
No, Madam Chair, thank you.
Okay. Another quick item, Connor McGrath from the ranch a week or so ago shared with you an update on the question that I brought a few weeks ago about the wall and moving the wall. And I just wanted to confirm that after he shared some details, all 3 of you confirmed back that you were comfortable with the direction to relocate the 4-H history segment to the 4-H or community building, and then retain other parts the recognition of the focus group that selected the ranch. That will be in other parts of the fairground, and that they will have some digital dedication displays around. And so I just wanted to, because that was an email, make sure that you all knew that you responded and supported that direction, and let others know that we're moving in a direction to relocate some of that wall component. So we're happy to answer any questions if anybody has any questions about that. But
I think we're good with
okay.
that.
And then we did have our consultants issue out the survey that we're doing, or polling actually, around the ballot item for transportation, and kind of post-election analysis of what happened with item 2A, that was the transportation. We should have results by next week, and so we'll probably be bringing those to you the week after that. I don't think we'll get them in time for the work session, but we're excited to see what we can learn from that. We also have our consultant who's going to start to do some stakeholder interviews, and I will share with you just after this the latest list that we have. It's a little bit of an ongoing, evolving list. Some staff will be contacting some folks, and the consultants will be contacting some folks, but I'll just share with you where we are with that too. So, and that's the last item is we are tomorrow with the community development team just taking a fresh look at the community development work plan. And we are not adding any new items to the list for this year. And we'll come back and give the board an update in terms of the status of any other ongoing items and that sort of thing. But I understand there'd been some conversation about pausing any new items on the work plan for this year as we get caught up on the things that are currently ongoing. So we'll keep you posted on that as well.
That sounds great. Thank you. I mean, I think we're all supportive of making sure that we're not putting too much on your plate, and knowing that things, come up organically anyway, that, there's no need to overwhelm staff or like I said, I feel like there's plenty to do, so.
Yeah, we
Just keep us
appreciate
posted.
that.
Yeah.
And that's all I have. Just a
Okay.
little bit past time here. Thank
Yeah,
you.
not bad. Thank you, Leslie. Well, I appreciate everybody's work. A big topics today to discuss, but we got through them. It's 2:32. We're adjourned. Thank you.